Dr. Sarah Chen stared through her laboratory's window at the shimmering structure that had materialized overnight in the vacant lot next door to the Berkeley Xenobiology Research Center. The building defied Earth architecture. Its surfaces rippled like liquid mercury in the California sunshine, and its spires seemed to fade in and out of visibility depending on how you looked at them. 3 months ago, when the Lucerian embassy announced their species would be establishing research outposts on Earth, Sarah had never imagined they'd choose to build one right next to her lab. The Lucerians were considered the foremost genetics experts in the known galaxy, and their arrival on Earth had sent shockwaves through the scientific community. But their reputation for intellectual arrogance preceded them. Sarah adjusted her lab coat and checked her reflection in the window. At 35, she was young for a department head, but her groundbreaking work on cross-species genetic compatibility had earned her the position. She'd have to rely on that expertise today. The Lucerian delegation was due to arrive any minute. The air in the parking lot shimmered, and a vehicle materialized that looked more like a soap bubble than a car. 3 figures emerged, and Sarah felt her breath catch. The Lucerians were roughly humanoid, but their skin had a crystalline quality that scattered light in rainbow patterns. Their eyes were completely silver, with no visible pupils, and their movements were so fluid they seemed almost choreographed. The tallest one stepped forward, easily 7 feet in height. "I am first researcher Kexar," they said, their voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. "These are my research partners, Velix and Naran." They didn't extend a hand or bow. Lucerians considered physical greeting customs primitive. "Dr. Sarah Chen," she replied, maintaining professional composure despite her racing heart. "Welcome to Berkeley." "Ah yes, the human institution that claims to study xenobiology." Kexar's tone carried clear condescension. "We've reviewed your published works, Dr. Chen. Quite ambitious for your species' current level of development." Sarah felt her cheeks flush but kept her voice steady. "We may surprise you. Would you like a tour of our facilities?" The 3 Lucerians exchanged glances that seemed to carry silent communication. "That would be educational," Velix said, their lips curving in what might have been amusement. As Sarah led them through the lab, she noticed how they barely glanced at equipment that represented the pinnacle of human achievement. When they reached her primary research area, however, their attitude shifted subtly. "These gene sequencing results," Moran said, floating closer to a holoscreen. "They suggest successful cross-species genetic integration at a cellular level." "Yes," Sarah said, pulling up more detailed data. "We've achieved stable hybrid cell lines between several Earth species previously thought incompatible. The key was identifying what we call universal adapter sequences in the genome." "Impossible," Kexar declared, but their silver eyes were fixed on the data. "The genetic barriers between distinct species are absolute. This is accepted science across the galaxy." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps you'd like to review our methodology. The results have been independently verified." The next 3 hours were intense, as the Lucerians scrutinized every aspect of her research. Their dismissive attitude gradually gave way to genuine, if reluctant, interest. When they finally prepared to leave, Kexar paused. "Your work is unorthodox, Dr. Chen, but it may have merit. We will be conducting our own research here on human genetic diversity. Perhaps some collaboration could be arranged." It wasn't until they'd left that Sarah learned from her assistant what the Lucerians had been whispering about among themselves. Their species was facing a devastating genetic crisis. Centuries of engineered perfection had led to a population-wide fertility collapse. They needed new genetic material to survive, and they'd come to Earth looking for it. That evening, as Sarah watched the sunset paint the Lucerian building in impossible colors, she realized this was more than a scientific opportunity. It was a chance to prove that humanity's primitive approach to genetics, embracing diversity and natural adaptation, might hold the key to saving one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. She didn't know then that she would become personally involved in ways she never imagined, or that her relationship with Kexar would evolve far beyond professional collaboration. She didn't know that she would soon challenge everything the Lysarians believed about genetic destiny, or that her research would spark a cultural revolution that would change both species forever. All she knew was that tomorrow would bring another day of working alongside the most arrogant, fascinating aliens she'd ever met, and she couldn't wait to prove them wrong about humanity's potential. As she prepared to leave her lab, a message flashed on her console. It was from Kexar. "Your presence is requested at our facility tomorrow morning. There are anomalies in your data we must discuss." Sarah smiled. Coming from a Lysarian, admission of anomalies was practically a declaration of revolution. She sent back a simple acknowledgement, then gathered her things. As she walked to her car, she noticed movement in the Lysarian building's windows, silvery figures watching her. Their curiosity about humans clearly went beyond mere scientific interest, and if her theories about genetic compatibility were correct, this was only the beginning of a story that would reshape both their species. The cool San Francisco fog rolled in, shrouding both buildings in mist, blurring the lines between Earth and alien architecture. Somewhere in that blur lay the future, one that neither humans nor Lysarians could predict. Sarah Chen had no idea she would be at the center of it all, or that her research would lead to the most significant breakthrough in genetic science since the discovery of DNA itself. She did know one thing, though. She was going to enjoy watching these aliens learn that humans were far more remarkable than they'd assumed. And maybe, just maybe, they'd all learn something about what it truly meant to be evolved. The Lysarian laboratory made Sarah's state-of-the-art facility look like a high school science classroom. Surfaces shifted and reconfigured themselves as needed, and holographic data streams filled the air with cascading symbols. But what caught her attention most was Kexar's expression as they reviewed her latest test results. "This cannot be correct," they muttered, their crystalline features catching the morning light. "Human DNA should not be able to achieve this level of adaptation." Sarah leaned closer to the floating display, her shoulder nearly touching Kexar's. She'd noticed they no longer flinched at her proximity, as most Lysarians did around humans. But it is correct. Human genetic code contains something we call junk DNA, segments that seemed without purpose. But we're finding these sequences act as natural adaptation mechanisms. Primitive code, verdicts interjected from across the lab. Random mutations that should have been engineered out generations ago, as we did with our species. "And how's that working out for you?" Sarah instantly regretted the sharp response, but 3 weeks of condescension had worn her patience thin. The laboratory fell silent. Even the humming equipment seemed to quiet. Kexar's silver eyes fixed on her, and for the first time, she saw something beyond scientific curiosity in their depths. Was it pain? "You know of our crisis." It wasn't a question. "Word gets around," Sarah said more gently, "even among primitives." A sound like crystal chimes filled the air. Kexar was laughing. "You are far from primitive, Dr. Chen. Unorthodox, perhaps dangerously so, but not primitive." They dismissed the holographic display with a gesture. "Walk with me." The Lysarian building contained gardens unlike anything on Earth, plants that seemed made of living glass, flowers that sang softly as they passed. Sarah had learned this was a recreation of their homeworld's ecosystem, though the original plants had long since gone extinct. 300 years ago, Kexar began, my species decided to perfect ourselves. We engineered out disease, extended our lifespans, enhanced our intelligence. With each generation, we removed more imperfections from our genetic code. Until you engineered yourselves into an evolutionary dead end, Sarah finished. Our birth rates have fallen to near zero. Those few children born often suffer catastrophic genetic collapse. Kexar stopped beside a crystalline flower. We came to Earth because your species represents something we lost, the ability to adapt, to change, to... They struggled with the word, evolve naturally. Sarah reached out and touched the flower. It chimed softly, responding to her body's electrical field. You know, Earth's history is full of species that became too specialized, too perfect for their environment. When things changed, they couldn't adapt. But life always finds a way forward, usually through hybridization, through embracing diversity rather than fighting it. Are you suggesting? Kexar's voice held an odd note. I'm suggesting that your people's salvation might not lie in engineering a solution, but in learning to let go of perfect control. My research shows human DNA's primitive adaptability might be exactly what your species needs. Through hybridization, their silver eyes widened. That would be unprecedented. Our people would never accept. They might not have a choice, Sarah said softly. And based on my preliminary analysis of Lizarian genetic structures, it's not just possible, it's viable. Your crystalline DNA sequences have patterns remarkably similar to our jump DNA, almost as if they were meant to combine, Kexar finished. They were standing very close now, and Sarah could feel a subtle electrical field emanating from their crystalline skin. Dr. Chen, Sarah, what you're suggesting would change everything, both our species, would ensure your survival and push human genetics forward by centuries. She met their silver gaze. Isn't that worth the risk? The moment stretched between them, filled with possibilities neither had dared voice until now. Then Kexar's communicator chimed, shattering the silence. The High Council requests an update on our research, they said, their professional manner returning. They will not be pleased with these suggestions. Then don't tell them everything, Sarah smiled. Just show them the preliminary compatibility data. Let them draw their own conclusions. Another crystal chime of laughter. You are corrupting me with your human capacity for selective truth-telling. I prefer to call it diplomatic adaptation. As they walked back to the lab, Sarah noticed Velix and Moran watching them with expressions she couldn't quite read. The other Lizarians had been spending more time studying human social interactions lately, particularly relationships. She wondered if they'd reached the same conclusions she and Kexar had about their species' future. That evening, working late in her lab, Sarah received another message from Kexar. The Council is intrigued by our preliminary findings. They have authorized expansion of the research program. Also, would you consider joining me for what humans call dinner? There are cultural aspects of your species I wish to understand better. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, her heart racing. This was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was the beginning of something unprecedented, a relationship that could bridge not just their species, but their entirely different approaches to life itself. She typed back, dinner would be perfect. But fair warning, human courtship rituals can be quite unpredictable. The response came instantly. I am counting on it, Dr. Chen. Unpredictability may be exactly what my species needs. As she gathered her things to leave, Sarah caught her reflection in the window. Beyond it, the Lizarian building shimmered in the twilight, its crystalline surfaces reflecting the sunset in ways that seemed to blur the boundary between Earth and alien architecture. Just like the boundary between their species was beginning to blur, creating something entirely new. The next few months would change everything, for her, for Kexar, for both their species. But for now, she had a dinner date with an alien to prepare for, and somehow, that seemed both the most natural and most revolutionary thing in the world. The news spread through the scientific community like wildfire. The first successful human-Lizarian genetic fusion had been achieved. Sarah stared at the pulsing cell culture in front of her, its DNA structure a beautiful hybrid of crystalline precision and adaptable human sequences. But it was the implications of this success that made her hands shake. The Council demands answers, Kexar said, entering the lab. 3 months of regular cultural exchange dinners had softened their formal demeanor around her. They want to know how this was possible when all previous attempts failed. Show them this. Sarah brought up the genetic visualization. See these sequences. Human DNA doesn't just adapt, it actively seeks compatible patterns. like a key searching for the right lock. When it finds those patterns in Lysarian DNA, they create something entirely new. Kexar moved closer, their crystalline hand brushing hers as they manipulated the display. The touch sent tingles up her arm, a reaction she'd been experiencing more frequently lately. But Sarah, there's something we haven't discussed. The implications. That this could lead to viable human Lysarian offspring. She met their silver eyes. I know, the genetic simulations are clear. It's not just possible, it's optimal. The combination would stabilize your species' fertility issues while enhancing both our genetic strengths. The conservatives on our council call it contamination. They're demanding we shut down the research. Kexar's voice held an edge of worry. There are those who would rather see our species end than blend with, forgive me, but they use the term lesser beings. Sarah laughed softly. Funny, we have people like that on Earth too. But you know what? They've been wrong every time. Human history is a story of adaptation, of cultures and genes mixing to create something stronger. A commotion outside interrupted them. Through the lab's windows, they could see a group of Lysarians approaching, their crystalline forms rigid with purpose. Leading them was council member Zarix, known for his hardline purist views. Dr. Chen. His harmonic voice held none of the musical quality she'd come to associate with Lysarians. This research violates our most sacred genetic protocols. It will cease immediately. With respect, council member, Sarah stood her ground. Your protocols are killing your species. The evidence is irrefutable. Evidence gathered through primitive methods, corrupted by human influence. He turned to Kexar. You've allowed yourself to be missiled by their crude approach to science, perhaps by other crude attractions as well. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sarah felt Kexar tense beside her, their crystalline surface flickering with suppressed emotion. But before either could respond, Velix stepped forward from their research station. Council member, I must speak. Their voice carried the formal tones of official testimony. I too doubted the human methods, but their crude approach has accomplished what centuries of our precise engineering could not. And there is more. Velix activated a holoscreen, displaying data Sarah hadn't seen before. We've been monitoring the human population near our facility. Their proximity to our technology, our energy fields, it's affecting them. Their already remarkable genetic adaptability is increasing. They are evolving, council member. Evolving to become more compatible with us. Shocked silence filled the lab. Sarah's mind raced with the implications. It wasn't just that human DNA could adapt to Lysarian patterns. Human beings themselves were unconsciously adapting to the alien presence. Nature itself was pointing the way forward. And there's this, Moran added quietly, bringing up another display. Preliminary scans suggest Dr. Chen's genetic structure has already begun incorporating Lysarian patterns. And first researcher Kexar's crystalline matrix shows traces of human DNA integration. Sarah felt Kexar's hand find hers, hidden from the others by the lab bench. Their touch held a new meaning now. They were literally changing each other at the molecular level. Zarek stared at the data, his rigid posture showing the first signs of uncertainty. This is unprecedented. That's rather the point, Sarah said softly. Your species engineered itself into a corner by trying to prevent the unprecedented, but life finds a way. It always has. Through contamination, through to looting our pure genetic line, but the conviction in his voice was wavering. Through adaptation, Kexar replied, through embracing change instead of fearing it. Council member, our population numbers fall with each generation. How many more children must we lose to genetic collapse before we accept that our path to perfection was a path to extinction? The next few hours were a blur of debate, data analysis, and urgent communications with both the Lysarian High Council and Earth's scientific authorities. By sunset, a historic decision had been reached. The research would not only continue but would be expanded. The first official human-Lizarian genetic integration program would begin immediately. As the others filed out, leaving Sarah and Kexar alone in the lab, the weight of what they'd achieved finally hit her. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was the beginning of a new chapter in both species evolution. Sarah, Kexar's voice was soft, their crystalline features catching the last rays of sunlight. There is something else we should discuss. The data about our genetic compatibility, it's more personal than we've acknowledged. She looked up at them, seeing past the alien features to the person she'd grown to care for deeply over these months. You mean the fact that we're literally changing each other? That our DNA is already starting to merge? Yes. They stepped closer. By our science's standards, we are already what humans might call a couple. Sarah smiled. I think we passed that point a few cultural exchange dinners ago. The sound of their crystalline laughter filled the lab, but it held a new note, one of joy mixed with possibility. Outside, the sun set on a world that would never be quite the same. Humanity and Lizarian societies stood on the brink of a transformation that would reshape both species. And it had all started because two scientists from different worlds had been willing to look past their differences and see the potential in combining their strengths. Not through perfect engineering, but through the beautiful unpredictability of natural adaptation. As they left the lab together, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other changes awaited them. But one thing was certain, whatever came next, they would face it together, as living proof that the future belonged not to those who sought perfection, but to those who embraced evolution in all its wonderful, messy glory. Would you like me to continue with Part 4? The story is building toward the larger societal implications of Sarah and Kexar's breakthrough, as both human and Lizarian societies grapple with their rapidly evolving future. The Berkeley campus buzzed with an energy Sarah hadn't seen since first contact. News crews from every corner of Earth and several alien worlds crowded the grounds, their cameras trained on the shimmering Lizarian facility where history was being made. Inside, Sarah adjusted the settings on the quantum microscope, watching in amazement as another successful hybrid cell culture divided and grew. The protesters are back, Kexar announced, entering the lab. Their crystalline form had subtly changed over the past weeks, traces of human DNA expression giving their surface a warmer, almost opalescent quality. Both human and Lizarian this time. Sarah glanced out the window. On one side of the street, humans carried signs warning about alien contamination and protecting human purity. On the other, Lizarians projected holographic messages about genetic corruption and species degradation. The irony wasn't lost on her. They're more alike than they realize, she mused. Both so afraid of change, they can't see the miracle happening right in front of them. Speaking of miracles, Kexar moved closer, their field harmonizing with hers in what had become a familiar comfort. The latest medical scans confirm it. The changes in our genetic structures are accelerating. We are becoming something new, Sarah, something neither human nor Lizarian. Before she could respond, the lab's security field pulsed. Velix and Miran rushed in, their usually composed features displaying clear agitation. The High Council is splitting, Velix announced. The progressive faction supports continuing our work, but the purists, they hesitated, exchanging looks with Miran. The purists are calling for immediate termination of all human Lizarian genetic research, Miran finished. They're claiming it's a human plot to destabilize our species. Sarah felt Kexar's field flutter with concern. They cannot stop what's already begun. The changes in those of us working closely with humans are proof that this is a natural progression. That's exactly what terrifies them, Sarah said softly. They spent centuries controlling every aspect of Lizarian evolution. The idea that nature might have its own plans. She was interrupted by an urgent alert on her comm device. A news broadcast filled the air. Breaking news. First confirmed case of spontaneous human-Lizarian genetic fusion reported in London. 2 more cases confirmed in Tokyo and Sao Paulo. Medical authorities are scrambling to understand how. It's spreading, Velix whispered. The compatibility is manifesting wherever our species have prolonged contact. Of course it is. Sarah couldn't help but smile. Life finds a way. We're not forcing this change. We just discovered what was naturally possible all along. The lab doors slid open again, admitting Dr. James Chen, Sarah's father and the Berkeley Xenobiology Department head. His usually stern features were alive with excitement. "Sarah, you need to see this." He activated a holographic display showing genetic scan data from around the world. It's not just isolated cases anymore. Wherever humans and Lizarians have been working together, living in the same communities, the genetic resonance is building. It's like two species discovering they were always meant to merge, Kexar finished. The compatibility we discovered isn't just biological. It's filling a gap in both our species' evolution. A commotion outside drew their attention. The opposing protest groups had grown larger, more agitated, but between them, something remarkable was happening. A small group of humans and Lizarians stood together, some holding hands, others displaying signs promoting unity and acceptance. Many showed visible signs of genetic blending, humans with slightly crystalline features, Lizarians with more organic patterns in their structures. "The council demands we return home," Moran said quietly. "They're calling all researchers back to Lizaria Prime for genetic purification." "And if we refuse?" Kexar's question hung in the air. "Then we become outcasts," Velix replied. "But we would not be alone. Already, thousands of our people are choosing to stay on Earth to embrace this change." Sarah watched the scene outside, her mind racing. Perhaps that's the real breakthrough here. Not just the genetic fusion, but the choice it represents. The choice to let go of engineered perfection and embrace natural evolution. Her father stepped closer to the window, his scientific detachment giving way to wonder. "You know, in Earth's history, every major evolutionary leap was met with resistance. But you can't stop nature's course. You can only choose whether to flow with it or against it. The question is," Kexar said, their hand finding Sarah's, "are our species ready to flow together?" A sudden flash of light from outside drew everyone's attention. The opposing protest groups had surged toward each other, but instead of the expected clash, something extraordinary was happening. The energy fields of the Lizarians were interacting with the bioelectric fields of the humans, creating aurora-like displays where they met. "Beautiful," Sarah breathed. "Even when they're trying to stay apart, they create something wonderful together." The lab's communication system chimed with an urgent message from the Lizarian High Council. Sarah felt Kexar tense beside her as they opened the channel, but instead of the expected condemnation, they were met with a surprising sight. The council chamber was in disarray, the traditional seating arrangement abandoned as younger members stood with the progressives. First researcher Kexar, the council leader's voice carried both resignation and a hint of relief. "It seems we cannot stop evolution's course. The council has voted. We will not just permit but encourage this natural development between our species. Perhaps it is time we remembered that true perfection lies not in stability, but in the ability to change." As celebrations erupted both in the lab and outside, Sarah looked up at Kexar. Their silver eyes held a depth of emotion that would have seemed impossible for a Lizarian just months ago. "Ready to become something new?" she asked softly. Their crystalline features shifted in what she now recognized as a smile. "With you, I already am." Outside, the sun set on a world in transformation. Humanity and Lizarian society stood on the brink of not just cooperation, but true unification. It wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But as Sarah watched the crowd outside blend together, human and alien boundaries blurring like watercolors in the rain, she knew they had chosen the right path. The future would be neither human nor Lizarian, but something gloriously, unpredictably new. And that was exactly as it should be. Would you like me to conclude with part 5? The final part would bring all the threads together, showing the birth of the first official human Lizarian children and the dawn of a new era for both species. 1 year later, Sarah stood in the newly constructed hybrid medical center, staring through a quantum glass window at what many were calling the miracle of the century. In the specialized incubation chamber, 3 hybrid embryos pulsed with a gentle light, their DNA a perfect fusion of human and Lissarian genetics. Their own child was among them. Their development exceeds all projections, Kexar said, coming to stand beside her. The past year had changed them both. Sarah's skin now held a subtle crystalline sheen, while Kexar's form had taken on more organic patterns. They were living proof of what they discovered. That evolution wasn't just about survival, but about finding new ways to thrive. Earth's governments are calling it the dawn of a new species, Sarah said, touching the quantum glass. Though I prefer to think of it as the reunion of 2 paths that were always meant to converge. The medical center occupied what had once been the disputed ground between human and Lissarian protesters. Now it stood as a symbol of unity, its architecture a seamless blend of Earth materials and alien crystalline structures. Inside, dozens of hybrid couples waited for their own chance at parenthood. The latest census data came in, Velix announced, approaching with a holoscreen. They too showed signs of hybridization, their formerly rigid crystalline structure now flowing like liquid silver. Over 10,000 confirmed human-Lissarian pairs worldwide. The genetic resonance continues to spread naturally wherever our species interact. And a resistance? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. The protests had died down months ago, as the benefits of hybridization became impossible to ignore. Human Lissarian children showed remarkable abilities, enhanced regeneration, natural interface with technology, and most importantly, a complete absence of the genetic instabilities that had plagued both species. The last purist holdouts on Lissaria Prime have requested immigration permits to Earth, Miriam said, joining them. It seems even they cannot deny the evidence of their own evolution. Our people are transforming, but not through engineering, through choice and natural adaptation. A soft chime from the incubation chamber drew their attention. One of the embryos, their child, was displaying new growth patterns. Sarah felt Kexar's field harmonize with hers in shared excitement as they watched crystalline structures form along organic cellular paths. The genetic structures, Dr. Chen said, examining the readings, they're not just stable, they're creating entirely new patterns. These children will have capabilities we can't even predict. Just as it should be, Sarah smiled. Life isn't about maintaining perfect stability, it's about embracing change, growing into something new. The medical center's main doors slid open, admitting a delegation that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Representatives from Earth's governments walked alongside members of the Lissarian High Council, their differences in appearance now barely drawing notice in a world where hybridization had become commonplace. Dr. Chen, first researcher Kexar, the council leader's voice held genuine warmth. The Galactic Federation has reviewed our petition. In light of the successful hybridization program and the remarkable achievements of our united research teams, Earth has been granted full membership status. Humanity and Lissarians will enter the galactic community as one people. Sarah felt tears in her eyes, tears that now held traces of crystalline light. We never sought to change the galaxy, she said softly. We just wanted to understand each other. And in doing so, you changed everything, the human ambassador replied. Our scientists are already receiving requests from other species facing similar genetic challenges. It seems humanity's primitive adaptability may be exactly what the galaxy needs. A sudden burst of light from the incubation chamber caught everyone's attention. Their child had shifted position, its tiny form emanating patterns of energy that danced between crystalline structure and organic matter. In that moment, Sarah saw the future, not just of their family, but of their united species. They're beautiful, Kexar whispered, their field pulsing with emotion that would have once been considered un-Lissarian. All of them. They're the bridge between what we were and what we can become. As if in response, the other embryos began to pulse in harmony, the combined light filling the chamber with colors that had no name in either human or Lysarian language. They were new colors for a new species in a new era. Outside the medical center, the sun set on a transformed world. The Berkeley campus, once ground zero for protests, now hosted the largest hybrid community on Earth. The shimmering spires of Lysarian architecture blended seamlessly with Earth's buildings, just as their peoples had begun to blend together. Sarah leaned against Kexar, feeling their fields merge in the way that had become as natural as breathing. Remember when your people thought Earth was too primitive to contribute anything meaningful to galactic society? Kexar's crystalline laughter rang out. Remember when your people thought aliens would come to conquer Earth rather than fall in love with it? I guess we all had a lot to learn, Sarah mused, about evolution, about adaptation, about letting go of our fears and embracing change. Kexar finished. Though I must admit, when we first arrived, I never expected to end up starting a family with a brilliant but stubborn human scientist. And I never expected to fall in love with an arrogant but enlightened alien researcher, Sarah grinned. Life's full of surprises. As they watched their child's light pulse stronger, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't started with grand plans to change the galaxy. It had started with curiosity, with two scientists willing to look past their differences and see the potential in each other. Everything else, the genetic breakthrough, the societal transformation, the dawn of a new species, had grown naturally from that simple beginning. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities neither species could have imagined alone. Their children would grow up in a world where the boundaries between human and alien, between engineered perfection and natural adaptation, had dissolved into something far more wonderful, the endless potential of life finding new ways to evolve, to connect and to thrive. And it had all started because Earth's primitive approach to genetics had reminded an advanced species of a simple truth. Sometimes the path forward isn't about engineering the perfect solution, but about having the courage to let go and see what natural wonders might emerge. As the stars began to appear above Berkeley, Sarah and Kexar stood together, watching their child's light dance with its hybrid siblings. They were no longer just human and Lysarian. They were the parents of tomorrow, the beginning of something entirely new. And that was the greatest evolution of all.